gave us an opportunity to look within, to explore our deepest values, and find our truest moments of happiness, what really makes us happy. We were put into a race, I think, which we didn't opt for, and most of us are clueless which way we are running, and the problems are here to see. If you look at the political system, the extent of trolling that's going on, and the confusion that is prevailing around, or be it in our various social systems and our inability to solve fundamental problems like poverty, unemployment, malnutrition. So it's all systemic. The effects of education and the policies that we've chosen over the 70 years, the impact is for us to see all around. Thankfully, we have made a step forward. The moment we saw NEP, it was like, wow, aha moment, because we wanted to shift from input centric policy to an outcome centric policy. So, even then, are we really giving a chance to explore that conscience of someone? No, discover that aha thing in each individual? Is a policy catering to that? So let's explore the nitty-gritties of today of this policy in today's session with Manohar Garu and Shantanu Gupta. Manohar Garu served as minister, as MLA twice in Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly, and now is leading the Political Affairs Committee of Janasena Party, which is promising reforms in education system, and we are hopeful about that. And with his vast experience in politics and coming from MBA background, his insights on education should be really interesting. Shantanu Gupta himself is a business grad and author, and also a homeschooler, and runs a Ramayana school. Quite interesting profile. That itself, I think, is a living example of national education policy, someone discovering all the fields that they want to dive into. So the format of today's session would be a brief presentation by both of our speakers for 15 minutes each, or the time they choose to, and then we will enter a Q&A mode where we'll take up questions from the audience and also have a conversation around that. So Manohar Garu, off to you for your presentation now.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Swati and Shantanu-ji. Namaskar to you as well as Raghavendra. Thanks for inviting me on this webinar. I think, vibe well in terms of what Swati just said in terms, can we really connect to the individual? Can we actually discover a person truly when we talk about education system? This was also one of my passion, and as a legislator, I was fortunate to head a House Committee on the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan irregularities that took place in Andhra Pradesh in 2005, 6, 7, those 3 years. And I had toured then the United Andhra Pradesh, all the districts of Andhra Pradesh, and went deep into the education system. Like you said, in this times of COVID, suddenly it's definitely a wow moment when you look at the national education policy. And we must give full credit to Narendra Modi ji and his team for having definitely thought out of the box and came up with something more innovative to make India prepare for the 21st century. I really think this national education policy is a roadmap for the future in terms of making India a knowledge superpower. Coming to the Telugu states, I mean, as you know, there are a lot of youngsters from the Telugu states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana who aspire mostly to get into IT services and other growth areas, and they're always constantly looking for employment and other opportunities. But the thing here is, like you truly said, can this policy translate into a common man's reality or expectation, and how is it deliverable? Having seen various governments and budgets and how much we incur expenditure every year, and the focus that seems to be lost midway after the initial hype of an announcement of a policy, I was also a little skeptical. But then things are changing. When we have agencies that are monitoring on a regular basis, agencies that are non-profit, non-governmental, who are driving people to understand that this is our money, our tax money, and it should go to the welfare of the people. I think there's a lot of awareness that comes in with that. because merely by looking at numbers or literacy levels and saying, this is where we stand or we have improved X percentage from the previous year, is not going to take us beyond a point where people are involved. I still remember there was a time when we talked about, parent-teacher committees being formed in schools so that there's more access to kids to have better education. But eventually, it's about people's participation in government itself. Politics, people tend to think is something which, once in 5 years, they line up and they cast their vote and they think the responsibility is over. I think that is something that we need to bring a change across India, to make them realize that what we are thinking today or what we are expecting today from the government of tomorrow should actually be deliverable, should be accountable, should have transparency, should have accountability. These are some of the things that I think we must emphasize on a regular basis. In Jan Sena Party, we are fortunate. Shantanu ji is also interacted with Pawan Kalyan Garu, so I'm so happy about that. We've always stood by this simple logic that what we commit or what we speak in public is something that should be achievable. We don't want to simply merely criticize a government or a policy and say, this is not something that's going to do good for us. We want to genuinely be part of the nation building. We want to contribute in the right way. And we don't want to, just hold press conferences and criticize people, but see how our criticism can be taken in the right way to improve upon a policy or a program which is being run by the government. That's how our thought came in when the AP government suddenly said that, they're going to have English as a medium of instruction across all government schools. Initially, a lot of people criticized us, thinking, why are you opposing, an introduction of English language, which is deemed to be exclusive domain of only the rich or the people who can afford it and not for the poor people? That's not what we said. We said we are against imposition. And at the same time, we are not opposing anything that is being proposed by the government. We're just saying Matrubhasha, mother language, mother tongue, is where the child feels most comfortable. That's where the culture and the tradition is protected. That's where you connect back to your ancestral, family bonds that are existing over a period of time. And once you have that as a basic education, once the child feels comfortable, he tends to gain more in terms of confidence, in terms of his skills, in terms of trying to go out to the external world and see how we can shine. Without the basic education where the child is made comfortable, we'll find a lot of dropouts. There are some really impoverished areas in Andhra Pradesh where I've had the opportunity to visit, and I used to see that some of the kids were coming to government schools only to be part of the midday meal scheme. That's how sad the poverty levels are in some areas. So governments have to wake up, have to pull up the bootstraps and say, okay, this vision document is going to stay irrespective of which party is in power, which party comes into the government. We have to make ourselves a strong commitment to build infrastructure, to build a teachers network, to provide students that kind of a support and confidence level where the investment that we are making is definitely going to last us for the next 20-25 years. Surprisingly, Andhra Pradesh government, I was astonished when I was just doing some research that the budget for last year, when compared to last year, the budget for this year's education was slashed by almost 7,000 crores. This was really surprising to me because this is the time when we are looking at investing more into education and health as a primary welfare objectives. But from last year's budget allocation of 32,000 crores, the present government brought it down to 25,000 crores. And this is only just merely budgetary estimates or allocations that they have made. When you look at spending, it's probably down to just merely 18 or 19,000 crores a year. So it's the people who are losing out, because when we talk of an effort of this scale, I mean, Narendra Modi ji, with a lot of vision, consultation, inputs from several people, even the minister was kind enough to recognize that Pawan Kalyan ji also had given a few suggestions, and those suggestions were also incorporated in the national education policy. We felt very happy about it because as a small party trying to contribute for a betterment of our society and to improve the lives of our citizens, when we make a good document or we emphasize on some points which we think will make a difference in our nation building, And when the people in power recognize it and include such things in their policy, I think that's true consultation and true brotherhood. I mean, we try to improve upon this. So, as a political party and as a politician with some experience, I can say emphatically that for a policy to succeed, for the policy to be implemented, the stakeholders are the people. Of course, the government is there, the institutions are there, but the people are the ones who should take this responsibility to ensure that the quality of education that our children demand, the infrastructure, the investment that needs to go into building up school education and primary education should be definitely beyond the expectations of ordinary people. It's the government that should take this responsibility. The complete onus of that responsibility lies with the government, and we all must rise to the occasion. Gone are the days when we can merely say, Kerala used to be the best state in the world, but in India. And unfortunately, the National Statistics Organization recent survey puts Andhra Pradesh as the lowest. I mean, that was a shock to me, and I'm sure to several other people across our two states, because we never thought Andhra Pradesh was so low. Compared to the national average of 77.7, the NSO said Andhra Pradesh was at 66.4, and this is a surprisingly, at the time of the division of the state, the reorganization of the state, Andhra Pradesh, the divided Andhra Pradesh was at 67.3%. So we have seen a come down of almost close to 2.5%, 3% compared to what was there in the 2011 census. This is a red flag. We must wake up to this reality, understand that there are concerns. We must question ourselves why our budgetary allocations have gone down, why our budgetary spendings are not made on time, and they're not actually reaching the people. So, we can proudly say we have several reports or several internal audits that keep going on and try to say that we are improving compared to last year. But the harsh reality is people in the rural areas, in the backward areas of the state, they are the ones who are most neglected. The children are suffering there. They are not able to gain access to quality education that we really want to. And I think the national education policy has tried to do those corrections that are much needed to bring back emphasis on these points and to open up education to a point where it's far more practical. This is what I really liked in this policy. It's a very, very practical way of learning education. Kids are going to be very enthusiastic. You are looking at education as a means of also gaining employment, and the national education policy certainly is trying to help us in that direction. So with these few, I think, initial remarks, I will hand it over back to you, Swati. Like I said, as a political party and as a responsible politician, I definitely would like to say that all of us need to be part of this and take responsibility to make sure that this wonderful policy that has been brought in by the Union government is implemented in letter and spirit across all over India and helps reach the common man.
Yeah, sorry, it seems I lost my Wi-Fi for a moment. Yeah. Thanks for your remarks, sir. Shantanu would love to listen to your views on the policy.
Yeah, so I'm also engaged with education in various capacities. I worked with Nandi Foundation in Hyderabad for a long time. In fact, in 2009 to 10-11, I was working with the district magistrate of Hyderabad very closely to work on almost 900 schools in Hyderabad for remedial education, right? And then I worked with UNICEF in rural Uttar Pradesh for around 1.5 years, around schooling and health. And then I moved to Center for Civil Society in Delhi, right, through which I also shaped a lot of my views, right? And what I've seen during this 4 or 5 years of working with politicians, working with bureaucrats, working with large non-profits, working to make a change in education, right? There are a lot of good intentions, right? As they also say that way to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So there were a lot of good intentions. And that was guiding the education policy largely. And as Manohar Garu said, around Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, which was brought by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And in Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and maybe that was the need of the hour then, right? The idea was to create the infrastructure. And what I was intrigued, I used to watch a lot of these chief ministers going to a village and holding their meeting inside the school. I was just wondering why they always hold a meeting inside a school, why not elsewhere? Then I asked a lot of people, they said a school is the only pakka infrastructure in the whole village. And that is the gift of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. The Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan now, in whole of India largely, infrastructure is not a problem. Maintaining of infrastructure might be a problem, that the toilet is not working or the boundary is not working. That's it. But throughout the country, from Jammu Kashmir to Kerala, there is 5+1. 5 rooms and 1 extra room for principal or teachers. That was the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan rule, 5+1, and a ground and a boundary and a gate and a toilet, right? So that infrastructure was made, right? And over years, I think during RTE, during various other state governments initiative, we kept on working on inputs. And we made inputs so stringent, and in our belief that making a nice room, making a nice classroom, nice bench, maybe a tube light, maybe playground, will make the education better. And which was, I think, rightly thought, but not scientifically thought. And that's why we call about the beautiful tree. If there is an amazing teacher and there is just a tree, and the kids are sitting and the teacher is amazing and teacher is engaged, the learning tools are amazing, the learning will happen, right? I think that we missed at some point. And when I was engaging with RT, and in fact we created a website when I was in CCS, right to education.in, we were comparing various RT rules, right? So after an act, every state had to make their own rules, right? And we encountered Gujarat's rule, right? Narendra Modi was the chief minister then. It was pre-2014. RT came in 2010. And his rule was very different from other. So the infrastructure norms were only given 15% weightage for the recognition of any private school. 85% recognition, 85% weightage was given to the learning outcomes. And this term called learning outcomes is the guiding principle of NEP, which makes me very happy and make a lot of us who have worked in education relentlessly to, and around 10 years back when we were talking about learning outcome, people used to boo us out, right? Okay, don't you want children to have a dignity, go into toilet, or they used to add a lot of emotions around it. And who will not say that? Don't you want children to have a playground? But again, I'll tell you a classic case of a private school in Shahadra. Shahadra is a very crowded place in northeast of Delhi, right? This private school owner who runs a very nice private school from last 20 years, affordable fees, 800,000 rupees a month. He told me that as per RT 2010, they asked me a particular size. They asked me a particular playground. He took me top of his building and he asked me just look around. And they were like houses everywhere, right? He said, where can I buy a land? And under RT, I'm illegal. And my school should be closed down. And I'm teaching, I have taught 20,000 kids in the last 20 years. What should I do? Only thing I have to show fudging and illegally I have to sign the papers. So we were forcing people to illegally follow the norm somehow, right? And we were wondering or having this wishful thinking that having a very good playground, having a lot of space, having a lot of toilets will solve everything. I'm not saying whenever I'll say this thing, people come back to, oh, you don't want people to have toilet. I'm saying that's not the point. The point is the space, the toilet, the playground, the teacher training, is that it? Like, why can't we peg? In fact, Karthik Muralidharan first time did the study in Andhra Pradesh that how teacher incentives pegged on learning outcomes can change the learning outcomes, right? And now finally we are talking learning outcomes comfortably. Earlier it was a bone of contention in teachers union, and teachers union is a problem sitting in India and America, right? In American debates also, prime minister debates will start. Teacher union is a problem there, right? Teacher union, a lot of governments make their policies which are like good for the teacher union, which does not make teachers accountable. As soon as this TET came, a lot of people say the existing teachers should also pass TET. Also, oh, you're not believing us, right? They throw this emotional card, right? So finally, I think my first point will be that from building desk, size of playground, we are coming to minimum literacy, minimum numeracy, life skills, all of that. First, second thing, I think there is a belief on the student side. The stigma of dropout is being dropped, right? We have seen from Bill Gates to a lot of others, right? Their college dropouts, right? Now in higher education, in first year if you drop out, you'll get a certificate. In second year if you drop out, there is a diploma given to you. With third year is not dropout, third year will pass, there is a degree, and fourth year is honors, right? Which is the stigma of dropout is gone. Even is 1 year spent in a college or a learning engagement, that's a term engagement. And because of this 12 plus 4, there is a nice coupling with the international school system, international college system. We all know, right? International colleges take 12 plus 4. And a lot of our graduations, apart from engineering, medical, and a couple of others, are 12 plus 3. And then people has to do a 2 years MA unnecessarily just to qualify that 1 year somehow, right? Now they can earn this 1 more year in continuing their education in honors, right? That's one. Second thing, now there is an extra focus on foreign students coming to India. That's also a very smart way of soft power. Currently, I think the number is around 40,000 students that come from outside, and that too only from certain countries, largely from Africa, largely from Southeast Asia, right? Why not throughout the globe? And we have institutions, right? So it seems the idea is now the 2 lakh students should come by 2023. That's the target, right? Which is a very smart target for internationalizing our brand, and that too our education institutions will also become competitive. There is also idea which how foreign universities can set up their branches easily in India, right? A lot of people will say, oh, commercialization of education, all of that. I think that thought will finally should die as soon as possible. The socialist thought have killed India enough and more. We somehow hated money all along, right? In fact, there is a guy called Nimish Adhia. He has done a beautiful study that how Indian protagonist or Indian hero in the movies in 1950s and 60s was always a mil mazdoor, right? And we always saw a hero in poverty, right? And the villain, who was mostly the father of the actress, right? He was this big sidelock person and doing wheeling, dealing with big cigar, showing that someone who's earning money has to be corrupt, right? And now I think finally in our movies also we're seeing now the new term, startup, entrepreneur, right? Which is a nice fancy term, which is good, right? But at the end of the day, it's businessman, right? So again, I think earning money should not be a taboo, which I think current government have told even during the budget presentation, and even now, how they're treating the private schools, giving autonomy, right? Private schools have always been taken by the government as versus, like we versus the private school, which is not the part, right? You are not able to provide education based the numbers, quantity and quality both, right? You yourself send your children to private school, right? In Tamil Nadu, someone did a study. Why I'm quoting Tamil Nadu, which is one of the progressive states, right? Like one of the developed states in India. In Tamil Nadu, 89% government teachers send their children to private schools, right? There was a study done a couple of years back by someone, which is a very smart, very, very funny and smart number. 89% of government school teachers is almost like that. You are a halwai, like you are a sweet shop owner. And you say, no, I know my sweet is not good because there is a lot of milawat adulteration and I'll buy sweets from Jeepula Reddy only, right? Because I know my sweet. So it's almost like teachers are not eating their own sweet. They're saying, okay, my kid will go to a private school, right? And so when private schooling structure is providing a solution, why treat them with contempt and with a harsh reality? In RT, how the treatment of government and private schools, if the government school is not following the norms of infrastructure, the schools, the gate, the desk, the toilets, they will be given the extra fund to do all of that, right? And private school, if they don't follow, they will get a notice, 3 months to reply. If they can't reply, 1 lakh rupees fine and 10,000 rupees every passing day. That's the highest fine in anything in India. India doesn't have 10, like Indian fines are like 50 rupees, 100 rupees, 500 rupees. Now, Nitin Gadkari ji has increased road challans to a certain extent. But again, 10,000 rupees per passing day is the highest fine India can have in any, and that to education institution. Why? Because his ground is shorter by some X number. Maybe he has 3 less toilets in his school, right? Because of the space he has, right? But even if he's providing good learning outcome, and proof of the pudding is in eating. Why I'm saying so? Whenever I go to a small private school, which is charging 200, 300 rupees in a small lane in Delhi, within a kilometer, I see a very fancy government school also, which is a good building, a very nice playground. And there is a midday meal there. There is a free dress, free books, everything there, right? And free cycles also in some states under some category. A parent leaving the school leaving all these freebies of midday meal, of dress and cycle, going to a little shanty looking school, like building wise, and paying 400 rupees extra, the parent is not stupid, right? Parent knows what is good for their child. He's leaving a nice looking school with so-called trained teachers, with midday meal, and spending 400 rupees extra and making the child go to a private school, and giving 400 rupees extra, right? Because the learning is happening there, right? The teacher is paid 5,000, 10,000 rupees there, right? So I think now this private school are being considered as the part of the solution rather than the problem. That's a big policy change and a mindset change, right? That I liked about the thing. Second thing about flexibility of choosing courses. As you told me in my bio, I'm a homeschooling father. And there is a TED talk, maybe I can request your viewers to watch it because that's a longest conversation. But I'll just only pick one point why I have a disagreement with schools generally, right? Because they have decided everything for the child already. What will happen at 9 o'clock? What will happen at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock? And child willingly or unwillingly has to fit in that structure. If math class is going on and he wants to do maths the whole day, no. After 40 minutes, the science teacher will come. After 40 minutes, the English teacher will come, right? In fact, I was teaching about, learning about the Gurukul system before the Macaulay system came in 1860. And Manohar Garu, it was an amazing form of education. Only 2 to 3 subjects every year, right? An amazing engagement. By the time you're 18, you know half of medicine also, right? Such comprehensive was education, right? And a lot of people chose their education. Shastrarth and debating and questioning the teacher was a respectfully. We used to touch the feet of the guru also, but we used to do Shastrarth and debate with the teacher also. Debate was a major form of Shastrarth, and debate was a major form of education. Now we are getting Socratic dialogues and all from outside Western. Okay, that is the only form of dialogue. No. India is full of dialogues. In India is the only culture where there's no term of blasphemy. You can question your religion and you can come out of it, right? Any of the Indian text, be it Ramayana, Mahabharata, or Gita, are not preaching text, right? Even for, let's say, a huge contention about vegetarian, non-vegetarian food. Gita chapter 18 tells about there are 3 types of food. This is the effect of 3 types of food. You choose whatever you want. And based on that, as you told, I started around a year back Ramayana school, where I pick out leadership lessons from Ramayana, right? Rama walked on this earth, a Muslim country like Indonesia, 88% Muslims there. They have a huge culture of Ramayana there. A Buddhist country like Thailand, their national book is Ramayana. Philippines, a Christian country, huge land of Ramayana. In India, there's a problem in adopting Ramayana because for some reason it is against the secular ethos of. In fact, the constitution, the original copy of constitution itself has the pictures of Ramayana, right? So how can we borrow? And that's why the Indian art and culture and Indian ethos, right? Maybe during the question answer round, I can talk more about it. And from there comes the mother tongue, because for us it's not only the language. With language comes a lot of culture, right? Language is not just a mean of communication. When as I told you before the start, my wife is Telugu, right? They say annam, right? And their connotation for food is rice. And if I'm eating a roti, they'll ask ki khana nahi khaya. For them, khana means rice. Until you don't eat rice, you have not eaten food. For a North Indian, until you don't eat 4 rotis, your food is not done, right? So I'm saying that the annam is become the part of the culture also. It's not only communication. For them, food means rice. For me, food means roti, right? And similarly, names. At times, a lot of books that we read, they have such examples and such connotation which we can't. Maybe Y for yak, and maybe a child living in Andhra Pradesh will never see a yak in his whole life. I mean, teach him something from Y which he will see in his life. Why tell him yak? Maybe he will learn about yak when he has to, right? Something contextualizing education in mother tongue, regional tongue, amazing thing. What I think there are a couple of things which I'm still not clear about, and as I told you, I'm keenly looking for the chapter 27, the implementation chapter, and as a legislator, I'm sure Manohar Garu knows about it. Like, policy documents are nice, though they give you a shift after 1986, the previous education policy. Now finally we have a very comprehensive policy education, which is very outward looking, right? Which is giving autonomy to private schools, which is giving autonomy to child to choose his subject, which is giving autonomy for child to even drop out and do something else, right? Autonomy for child to select the subjects, right? Not only and a private school to experiment with a lot of alternate schooling. I'm a homeschooling father. Finally, there is a term called homeschooling in the policy document, so it's no more an illegal thing, which it was made out to be until now. So that's what I'm saying. It's a policy of freedom. It's a policy keeping in mind that every individual is responsible. A school is responsible, a teacher is responsible, a child and parent is self-responsible. Government is not the only my-baap who can decide what has to be done, right? And this my-baap culture should go. I think sooner it goes is better. It's going in various fields. We are seeing how in Companies Act it's going. That a lot of attestation you can do yourself. A lot of this unnecessarily gazetted document, signed documents are going. So I'm finally giving the responsibility to the individual, which we're seeing in last 5-6 years anyways in a lot of other policy directions that coming by this government. And this is one more in the series. But again, as I said, devil lies in the details. We all should closely watch the implementation and make sure that how center implements it, how different states implements it, and it should not get marred by the politics of implementation. Yeah, these are my starting remarks. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Shantanu. That you pretty much covered the entire spectrum of policy. But I think at the essence of it is choice, right? I'm not sure if choice is an attitude that has entered our society per se. I mean, it's good to have it on policy documents, but at each level of education, if you look at teachers or if you look at parents or the entire administration within the governments, I'm not sure if they're really pro-choice. Our attitude is still to dictate, to enforce some outcomes rather than pro-choice. So, Manohar Garu, how do you see it? I mean, is our society ready yet? Are our attitudes conducive yet for such a liberal policy? While we are still in a dictatorial terms with respect to someone needs to be monitoring all the outcomes. So, how do you see that?
I think Shantanu pretty much covered a very wide spectrum, in as short time as he could. And one thing that really stood out was, about how, as a society, we always to encourage debate, dialogue, and this guru shishya culture that we used to have, respect our teachers as much as we respect our parents. Unfortunately, the ability or the inability to question is still there. You're taught not to disrespect an elder by asking a question. This is something which has been a wall always. Even when young kids want to ask several doubts that they have in their quest to increase their knowledge, it's considered rude if they ask too many questions. This is unfortunately there in our society. But I think this generation, there's a sea change. I mean, from what we have gone through in schools and what is happening now at the moment, I think there's a lot of encouragement to ask more questions, to understand it from a broader context, to get them involved more into from the practical sense. I think these are things which will definitely make this policy succeed, because when you want to discover a person's talent, when you want to give him an opportunity to use his skills and come up in life, I think you have to be very broad-minded and open up. And as a family, sometimes we tend to understand the child much more in detail than what a teacher can understand in school. But a policy like this, which is aimed more towards preparing a student to gain good employment, to gain more knowledge, to understand our ancient traditions, to look at the world as one great opportunity. I think these are several factors which will help them overcome these barriers and make it a far more open society and make this policy actually implementable. I strongly believe in that.
Shantanu, I want to get your view also on how ready are our attitudes for such a liberal policy.
I think you're right. I think I don't want to attach a term, a liberal or not liberal. I think we over years, so we were a liberal society in the use of the term, right? Meaning like giving importance to individual debates, discussions. Individual was a responsible person, but again, I think over years of invasion on us, we have to save our culture, right? India is, and when I keep researching in my books also, India is not a civil the only living oldest living civilization, just like that, right? They did a lot of adjustment to do that, and one of the adjustment to follow the command, right? So that, and they have, that has become the DNA of our society, that we have to get an endorsement from someone, which can be a government or a school or a private school. They will decide for us, right? Or a yoga, we will only do yoga when it will become International Yoga Day. We will only use haldi when America will ask for a patent for haldi, right? We will only use Ayurveda when a lot of people call it alternative medicine, right? Then we will use Ayurveda, right? Baba Ramdev is like no good for us, right? Because he doesn't wear tie coat, right? He's not handsome, maybe, right? So I think those may say, what do you say, feelers from outside has become part of our value system. But now I think we as a nation are developing. I'll quote you a very interesting thing. In 1983, some old commentator was telling me, because I do TV debates. So one old cricket commentator was telling me that when 1983 India won the World Cup, right? It seemed there was a small survey was done. The national mood of the country was up, right? Can you imagine a World Cup victory? Well, like we won the World Cup again also, but that was not like some national mood got up, right? Maybe for 2-3 days we were happy, then back to, because in 1983 nothing good was happening in the country. But that's not the case today. Today we have maybe more than 15 startup which are unicorn. We have our politicians going abroad. Maybe Narendra Modi gathering up for 60,000 people. We won Olympic medals. Maybe we won Asian medals. We are doing a lot of scientific research. We have like 15 things to be proud of, right? So as a country now, we know that we can assert and we can make individual choices and be successful in that. So I'm saying this is the right time as a society also, which was not then, and now this policy fits into that. I can make my choices through cultural choices, through business choices. I can be a dropout, I can be a startup, I can be entrepreneur, I can start something else, right? I may take a gap year. This is a new trend, right? In homeschooling circle, this is a new trend that you take a gap year. You don't study for a year, which is fine, right? So in my homeschooling video, I'll start with, whenever someone asks me, Manohar Garu, that why you don't send your child to school, my question back to them is, why you send your children to school? And normally they don't have an answer. They say, because everyone sends. That's their only answer. And their only question, when I say he's learning like this, he's learning like this, their only question is, okay, what about his 10th certificate? And my counter question is, okay, if I get your 10th certificate by legal or illegal means, right? Will you be fine? Like, is that your only outcome, right? And that's the idea has become. The school going has become because everyone sends, and because I need the 10th or 12th certificate, right? Is very vibrant. We are talking like nobody can just run away doing a mischief. Any government, any politician, right? And in fact, when Prime Minister spoke about national education policy, he talked about, if you remember, do a lot of discussions, do a lot of webinars. This is not the final policy. We can still make it change. Law will come. And this, what we are doing currently is one of the steps. We are doing a webinar, and I'm sure a lot of people will hear it, right? So I think let's keep doing even more minute one, take one particular section, maybe one on higher education, one on lower education, one on different parts, and we can
And a couple of district educational officers were really pulled up and suspended because some of them had not even disbursed the basic 2,000 rupees a year that they used to give to children's library in these schools to buy books or to buy charts and maps and things like that. And they had accumulated, 160 or 170 checks in their drawer, just kept like that, waiting for for another year to pass by before they actually send it to those respective schools. So I think it's merely by saying that people's participation or parents' participation is not sufficient. I think, like Shantanu said, there's a far more accountability involved today in politics and governance. Media is playing a very critical role. Media is aware, trying to look at every possible angle where people are siphoning off funds. But the nitty-gritties are always missed. I mean, when you look at, like Shantanu said, you're looking at building an infrastructure. I go back to Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. So all that they would do is, put one door there with a number and say, this is a toilet meant for girls. When in reality, there was no toilet behind the doors. So these kinds of, unfortunate scams have happened. The construction of those infrastructures was very poor. So the buildings would not last for more than a year or 2 years. Kids would hate to go and sit in those schools. So when you're looking at the program or the policy, its success eventually depends upon how at the grassroots in school, he will not be able to get any support from the parents if the parents are not educated in English like he's thinking. So medium of instruction up to the 5th standard minimum, as what has been proposed by Narendra Modi ji, I think is an excellent way to take this forward. And basic accountability at all levels of governance. At the village level, the panchayat should be involved, the parents should be involved in that. And not just the parents, but there's several people. Actually, when you go back, I think Shantanu will definitely appreciate because he's done so much work in Hyderabad and surrounding areas. The education sector stood tall in these areas because of the great donors that we used to have. Yeah. Several of these people, it's incredible how much land they have donated for schools and colleges and buildings. So many families have come into this nation building. The government came in later, but in the initial years, so many families have come forward and donated their own lands and buildings for running educational institutions. So that kind of a participation, that kind of a passion needs to come back to the people. And government definitely has to be more transparent and accountable, because the funds that we are allocating each year, where are they going? How are they being spent? Is it really reaching the last person, the last mile? I think that way we can, without a doubt, improve the quality of our education.
Shantanu, you had something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the SMC bit, right? So SMC came in RT that school management committee should be made, I think section 18, 19, or maybe 21, 22, I think. But again, if you see the social structure, I went to so many schools, right? Where SMCs, and in fact, the Supreme Court order came in particular time that SMCs has to be formed, and it was almost a 99% compliance. When I went to like random SMCs, the registered have even signs of people attending it. When I went to their home, they didn't even know they're part of SMC, let alone the signature. So, and the signature was like principal did not do the signature, force the signature. When the parent came to drop, he made them sign on something, right? And that became the norm, right? And then I dig deep that why parents are not interested in the education of their kids, right? Why they will not participate in SMC. As you told, first of all, currently government schools are only accessed by someone who's like poorest of the poor. If you go little bit on the income ladder, you siphon off your way to a private school, a small private school, right? So this poorest of the poor, most of the time, both the parents are working. They hardly have any time, even on a Saturday, Sunday, to attend any of your SMCs. That's one. Second thing, if you see the power equation, right? You go to any village, the principal salary, government salaries have improved, by the way, quite a lot. A lot of people don't know. People say, oh, salaries. A government school principal comes in a car, a four-wheeler, he has a salary of, based on his experience, 70,000 to a lakh, which is a very good salary to my mind, right? And that too in a rural district, even all the more, because savings are quite a lot, right? And he's very well dressed, he's very well spoken, right? And this parent who is like economically come from a very weak background, can you imagine the power equation between these two people? Whatever SMC, whatever you make, right? This person who can't speak even proper Telugu, a high Telugu, if I can call it, right? His local dialect, maybe doesn't know, have a sense to speak, maybe don't have the courage to speak, right? So maybe a structure will only not help. Maybe a couple of years you have to artificially somehow make sure a DM sits in most of those meetings, right? And then confidence will come at some point. Or you give some power to the SMC. That can you decide some part of the salary of the headmaster, right? Or can you decide some holidays of the teacher, right? Otherwise, these are the toothless committee. I'll give you 2,000-3,000 rupees for you to maybe do some small chota thing, and you'll make sure you'll come, gather, eat some chai biscuit, and go, right? That's like just a tick mark. And tomorrow you'll say, oh, tomorrow the parents will come to you and say, oh, I give you SMC, you did not do anything. Like it's like a giving a toothless position and asking you to do the manage the school, right? So the name is big, school management committee, with hardly any funds, with hardly any powers, right? So that's why it's a misnomer. It's like parents coming, having a good time at some time, and so that's why I'm saying the power equation I've seen is a huge barrier, right? Until and unless this SMC is given more power, which should be there when RT is changed, right? Somehow, because in private school, teachers have the power, the parents have the power, because they're paying the fees. That's their power, right? If not your school, I will go to another school next year, right? So that, and here it's free ka school. It's to kripa hai, Bhagwan matlab is my baap, that government is my baap, it's free, is this government, the school is free. So, and they don't realize that a government school in Delhi, how much is the per child cost? Almost 2,000 rupees per child per month, which is a lot of money. Only 85% of private school charge that kind of fees. So if, and coming to the idea of vouchers, if that money is available to children as a voucher, I doubt anybody will go to a government school. If you give a choice, Manoharji, to any parent, that the money that I'm spending in the government school now per child, look, it's free for the parents, but government is spending a lot of money, right? And that comes between 800 rupees to 2,000 rupees based on the economy of different state. If you give this 800 rupees or 2,000 rupees to the parent, invariably parent will run to a private school to his capacity, right? Which we have done the experiments when I was CCS through voucher programs, right? So this power equation has come through choice. This power will come, and maybe through giving more power to SMC, this power should come, right? Which is currently not there in a parent who accesses government school for their children. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the limited point I wanted to make.
Yeah, I was witness to that. Both my parents are government school retired headmasters in and around Guntur district. So, I think there's also caste dimension there. Someone from
Right.
lower caste could never get into controlling SMC. Huge issues.
Right.
Next question again to you, Shantanu, on holistic learning. I mean, holistic learning has become a thing now. Many private schools charge fees in lakhs to equip children with holistic learning, right? So, and I see kids naturally learning such things. They just YouTube, randomly Google stuff. They're learning and innovating on their own. I don't see any value addition that is actually done by schools in this process. So why are parents paying this double tax? On one hand, they're paying tax government to equip children with education and give them good health. On the other hand, they're again paying fee which runs into lakhs of rupees. And I see no value addition by schools, and children are really very smart. They're able to catch up on things and do learn on their own. In fact, I myself have learned so much through books and Coursera than I've learned through education or college. So what is holistic learning, and I don't know, does it come through this formal process or is it a part of evolution?
Right. Is this question to me? Yeah,
Yes.
see, I'm a homeschooling father, and everyone asks me like, what subjects do you teach your child, right? And even I don't know, like, what do you need? Like, we have this blind belief that curriculum set by a Telangana state board or a Andhra state board or a central government state board or IB, this is very scientific. I sat through a couple of these meetings. I am telling you, without naming name, this is not a very scientific process. There are 10 people sitting there. It's based on the wisdom of one person and the set of 10 people, right? And how they have also reared their children in a very orthodox way. There's nothing innovative how they've reared their children, right? All these 10, 15 people who are in any such committee or any room, right? In the absence of that, if you think back, they say, currently what I do in life, right? I write books, I run Ramayana school, and I come on TV on debate. Like, did I learn any of this skill in those 12 years? I guess not. I went to a Kendriya Vidyalaya, so at least there are a lot of extracurricular activities in the Kendriya Vidyalaya. So the extracurricular activities, so that I'm coming on stage every week, or I'm doing a lot of things, that's helping me. But that math, the logarithmic table, that singing a song around the periodic table in chemistry, all of that, is that helping me? Maybe not. Like, did I choose that to mug up all of that? Maybe not, because that was part of the curriculum. So right now, what my child is doing, what he's trying to do, we try to not force, kind of push one or two things for a month or so, and we'll see. So let's say currently he learning, we have settled on four things for our son, right? He learns Sanskrit through a PhD scholar, currently online. He learns chess. He learns Carnatic music, vocal. He learns Carnatic music, violin, right? These are the four things he's learning formally. Rest all, I don't know what all he's discovered on internet. Oh my God, that he is an amazing artist. He's 7 years old. His hand is so nice. And I'm not saying my son is some Einstein. As you told, given a free opportunity to learn, they have the way how to learn. So now what I'm trying to inculcate in my son is how to learn, right? Rather than what to learn, what he will figure out, right? Factual information, Google is a second away, and a lot of other platforms are a second away, right? So how to learn is an important thing. How to figure out things is an important thing. But again, if schools are offering something which is holistic and parents are paying for it, I'm saying it's a market. I think they are allowed to offer a product, and parents are allowed to choose or not to choose it. That then it's a free will engagement that's happening. The lesser free will is the private school recognition, which is again NEPs, I think, currently not solving. Currently, getting a recognition to form a private school needs some 25 licenses. People say you need less licenses to open a refinery. Why I'm saying a refinery? Refinery sounds complicated, right? School is like a very simple structure, right? You need almost 25 licenses to start a school. And even today, we are living in that socialist era that every school and college has to be not for profit, right? Which I think we have to do away with. I think we are in this culture that how can you earn profit through school, right? See, every private school is earning profit. Only thing they are not showing you because you have created as a non-profit, right? They do a lot of they call it creative accounting, or if I in the simple word fudging in their accounts, and people hate to do that. I meet a lot of principals. They say, I hate to do this fudging in my accounts, but you don't allow me to earn money. You say, okay, no, every profit have to be plow back in the system, right? Because you cannot earn profit through schools, right? And can you imagine a Amity, a Galgotia, which is a sponsor for IPL, a 5,000 crore rupees property? Do you think it's non-for-profit? Like, it's a joke. It's open joke, right? Everyone knows they earn profit. Only thing, no, they're not for profit. They're registered as a non-for-profit because government of India and government of UP and government of Andhra Pradesh and government of Telangana says so, right? Because we have I don't know, in Hindi there is we have this idea that close your eyes, right? The truth is there, but close your eyes, right? It has to be non-for-profit. Everyone earns profit. I'll tell you the ways how they earn profit. They pay a teacher 10,000 rupees, which is a rightful salary for the teacher because it's a willful arrangement with the teacher in the school. And they made him sign or her sign on a 25,000 rupees salary, which is the pay commission salary, right? They plow back a lot of money in the system back. They plow back money through bus fees, school fees, bag fees, right? So schools, a new entrepreneur today can start a Baiju, but cannot start a school. Because no bank will loan him, no investor will invest in him. Because how can you invest in a non-for-profit? You can do a charity to a non-for-profit. You can't do invest in a non-for-profit, right? Can't a Ravindran Baiju start a 2,000 chain school? In India, the biggest chain is, I think, DPS or DAV with 700 schools. After RSS, which runs 35,000 schools, a social organization, after that, the biggest private chain is only 500,000 schools. Government has 13 lakh schools, 14 lakh schools, right? Why the chain is not being developed? Because it's so tough, because there are infrastructure norms, nobody will loan you, nobody will invest in you because you're not for profit, right? So this chain still has to be unshackled. There's a huge power in Indian entrepreneurs, which can create a Baiju or a Oyo or a Flipkart, but they cannot create a school chain or any alternative way of learning, right? That's why they're coming in education services. That's why a Whitehead Junior becomes a 300 million company and a Baiju becomes the world's biggest edtech company, right? Baiju's biggest exposure, and Baiju's Whitehead Junior has the biggest exposure to America, and they're not teaching Indian Americans; they're teaching like American Americans, right? So Indians as knowledge power can do that, but again, a lot of policy space should be unraveled and unshackled to make that happen. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks much. Manohar sir, I have before we move to audience questions, I have one last question for you.
Yep.
This is regarding dropout rates. I've studied AP Socioeconomic Survey, and it shows huge gap with respect to enrollment ratio and continuing further in education, especially for SC/ST children. High dropout rates. So this brings the question: if education is a problem that needs to be solved only by education, I think it's beyond that. It's a socio-economic problem. We are looking at education system as a problem that can be solved by governance mechanisms, more accountability, more monitoring of outcomes. But how are we equipping parents from lower socio-economic backgrounds to send their children to schools and build that ecosystem of learning in such communities? It becomes a political question too, in that sense.
Sure. Swati, before the division of the state, the worst performing district was Mahbubnagar, which was so close to Hyderabad, which is so close to the so-called international airport, Shamshabad, and all the developments that have been happening around Hyderabad because of the extreme levels of poverty. I remember Sainath, who was the rural editor for Hindu at that time, wrote a wonderful article about bus to Bombay. And every day from Jadcherla in Mahbubnagar district, we had almost 15 buses a day of migrating workers going to Bombay. And none of them knew when they would come back and, what's happening back to their families, about their families. So from there, today, I think Srikakulam, Vizianagaram are one of the worst districts. And like I said, it was a shock to me when I saw the National Statistics Organization release its data, which said the literacy rate was the bottom in the whole country. Is it because of lack of budgetary allocation? Is that the government believes that just doling out welfare schemes is enough to take care of the people and not give a priority to education in the way they should? But when you look at school dropouts, from what I have seen in Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, it's mostly about the girl child dropping out of school at a particular age because of puberty and the lack of infrastructure facilities like toilets in schools. This was a constant battle that we came up that we had to face during those days. And slowly, over a period of time, parents began to believe that sending their children to private schools where they think that they have access to infrastructure will make a difference rather than sending them to government schools. So the school dropouts that used to happen, especially in the backward classes, the SC, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, those areas were pretty high. When you look at the tribal agency areas, it was very tough to bring these children to school in the agency areas of Visakhapatnam or in the Bhadrachalam areas where there was a high element of tribal population. I think we as responsible citizens should look at socioeconomic factors for the school dropout reason. Children definitely want to go to school. They definitely want to have a level of knowledge and fun time that they should their age. And Shantanu should forgive me for saying that because he's more into home education, but I think that's a wonderful thought that he's started upon. More and more, I mean, now that we're all working from home and realizing how essential or wonderful a family as a unit can be towards bonding and building each other's strengths, I think it's a wonderful way to see and believe that there can be education, there can be knowledge building, there can be skill building even when you stay at home and learn these things. So kids who are dropping out of school is not necessarily just because they have no choice. It's because of a variety of reasons. I think the parents are migrating to different areas for work. For most of these poor families, they look at a child as another helping hand. They don't necessarily believe in formalized education. They think as long as he becomes part of their family and is earning something for them, whether at a farm or at a workshop or whatever it may be, it can make a difference. This new midday meal scheme that we started and the right to education policy, I think that's also a fantastic policy. These two things should help us come back, climb the ladder, and prevent school dropouts. It's certainly a political commitment. I think each one of us in politics should commit themselves and take smaller targets. Each one of us can take a district or a constituency, for instance, and say, I want to improve my own level of kids who are attending the school. I think as responsible public representatives, MLAs and MPs should also be made aware of these statistics. Unfortunately, in the district reviews that we do, education is not given much prominence or importance in the presentations given by the officers. If we are able to involve, I think UNICEF does a tremendous job, and I'm sure the several other NGOs who do that. If we are able to build awareness among our elected legislators and parliamentarians that one of the key factors for economic growth and for happiness among the citizens is giving their children good education and showing them the right path, I think we'll be able to prevent school dropouts and encourage more kids to come back to school, and in the process, utilize the infrastructure that we have.
Yes, Shantanu, please.
Yeah, just on the same thing on the school dropouts, I think I completely agree with Manohar Garu. I think when a parent drops their children out of the school, right, there may be very many reasons, and it should not be taken as that they don't have the focus on education, right? Because see, I have seen if you give 100 rupees to a person economically lower down, they will make a far better use of that 100 rupees than all of three put together, right? They have a better sense of opportunity than us because we have a lot of opportunities to choose from, right? So I think for them, the opportunity is, shall I go to a government school, which is not delivering? Or shall I teach my girl or boy a life skill, which will help him or her in life, right? And we have seen as soon as they get a better option, maybe access to a private school, economic level, they do send them to a private school. And that's why I'm saying creating artificial center of excellence is also a good idea. And this is my project, which I keep telling a lot of politicians, when I keep meeting, right? In a lot of villages, Manohar Garu, when I travel in UP and Bihar, parents tell me that I'll say there is Hindi. पढ़ के होगा क्या? They will give me example of an ex-boy. He's BA, he's BSc. What is he doing? He's doing nothing great in life. So they're not center of excellences, right? For them, even after studying college, nothing happened, nothing great happened, right? So you have to artificially create the center of excellence. When I say artificially, not by fudging the data. Artificially means working. Let's say go to every village or maybe every block and make sure that there is a through some scrutiny process, there's 1 or 2 person who reach maybe IIT, maybe IIM, right? Through a due diligence, working on them, training them, right? They become an IS officer, start a, and then they have examples to follow. They will not get excited by seeing a Baiju's face or a Sachin Tendulkar's face, right? They should know something relatable that would happen nearby, right? So if you know this guy called Anand Kumar, right? Super 30, that movie also, that who trains 30 children every year and who cracks IIT, right? There is a study done, all the villages where these kids have come, the level of education and the aspiration for education has increased, right? In all those villages. Let's say simple case in Hyderabad. Hyderabad, since the times all these 3-4 badminton champions have come, like there are, I know that 20 badminton academies have opened in the last 5-6 years, because now there is aspiration that, okay, my kid can become a Saina Nehwal or a Sindhu, right? Or a Kashyap, right? Because it was not there, right? Similarly for boxing and wrestling in Haryana and Punjab, which is not a traditional phenomena, right? So you have to create this center for excellences also. Sometime a Gopi Chand maybe, or the wrestler may, but that's that. If you make it systemic, right? Make sure that every district, a Mehboob district, should have 10 people whose photo should come on the front page. Now these days, every coaching academy is giving pages after pages, right? Like Narayan Academy, Akash, Alan, right? Who is first in IIT? IIT JEE result is out. And many times I feel the same first is claimed by so many coaching institutes. I don't know which coaching the person has did exactly. But again, if we have this center of excellence from various places, that can be a good government policy itself, because I have seen their aspiration for education has little low, because they have not seen someone doing education and excelling great in life, right? So that is also a point. They're making a smart choice by homeschooling them, not homeschooling, homeskilling them, or skilling them in a profession which they think can give a livelihood for the child.
Yeah,
I think it's well said. Well said. Yeah.
I remember reading an essay on Caravan, which was saying most of these skilled people come from lower caste, but if you look at how much they're going into higher education institutions on the same skill, their numbers are falling down. See, let's say someone is engaged in metallurgy as a skilled activity, but they might not be taking up metallurgical engineering in higher education institutions. So I think that's something we might have to look at. Okay, so I'll quickly go into audience questions. Manohar sir, this is for you. What are your views on entrepreneurship in the education sector and opening up private sector in education?
Okay, like I said, one of the great things that I liked about this policy was the fact that education is being opened up to everyone, especially foreign universities. And the reason why I keep saying that is, in terms of learning, there's far more scope for practical learning in this education policy. So I believe that it opens up opportunities for both the corporates as well as individuals, because there's a vast array of subjects, vast opportunities for them to choose which particular line they can excel in, and how they believe that this kind of education will take them forward. Can an MBA degree really get you a job? When you go out after graduating, are you able to get a job when you graduate from one of these colleges or universities? This is a question that each one of us should ask ourselves, because merely by saying that I have done an engineering course or a management course, there is a very good chance of me getting a job. I think those days are gone. People are looking more at several other skills. You need to be a good communicator. You need to be someone who's aware of what's happening around the world. You need to be intelligent in person-to-person interaction. You need to see how you are able to understand customers' needs. These are points or skills which each one of us should learn and make ourselves more marketable when we go out after graduating. So I think partly to your question, I believe it leads to entrepreneurship because it prepares the individual to think in terms of aspiring to be an entrepreneur rather than in the old days, like how they used to think, okay, let me become an IAS officer, that's my goal, or an IPS officer, that's the only goal that I have. I think today the opportunities are far more where you can actually try working towards what you dream of. 2 weeks ago, I was interacting with a group of youngsters from Andhra University, and one of those kids had actually filed for a patent in artificial intelligence. So I think India is opening up. India is definitely the young generation is aspiring to do much more than what the previous generation has done. And I think thanks to this policy, the doors will open up for a lot of creativity among youngsters, and they'll be able to shine.
Yeah, I remember conversations with most of our students. I train IAS aspirants, and this is the first thing I ask them. I mean, like, is there any other way where you can really excel by putting in all your skills? Most of it is conditioning that they come to these aspirations. So, yes, I think that's the way ahead. Uh, Shantanu, this question is for you. We emulate positive behavior. What will enable our teachers to create joyful, constructive classes? Do teachers get such environment for themselves?
Yeah, I think we are still far away from that situation. Though teaching in schools is still not a aspirational thing, right? Though the salaries have increased, but not to a level where this is the first choice, right? And a lot of people don't even know. I think they're not even aware, right? Let's say army runs this campaign, right? I'm sure you must have seen those army nice advertisements that okay, like a very handsome looking boy with a gun, and they're like, do you want to give your life for the country, right? The school education department doesn't run any aspirational thing. Right? So we have to make teaching aspirational. So when you're trying for Infosys, you should also try for a school teacher, right? Because the job, because the salaries are decent. A starting salary in Infosys is 17-20,000, and the starting salary of teacher is more than that. It is in seventh pay commission is easily 25,000 to 40,000 in different states based on the state pay commission adoption of it, right? So the starting salary, only thing the increments are a little less, but by the time you end your career, you learn 1.5, 1 lakh. So maybe that parity can bring in, right? It should be made inspirational, and once it is inspirational, once they have the money in their hand, I think teacher will take their jobs even more seriously. And a lot of schools is there, like go to the best of the private schools and see how teacher are taking their jobs seriously there, right? And you know this fellowship called Teach for India fellowship, right? I think Hyderabad also has it now. Mumbai has it, Delhi has it, Pune has it, right? So these young boys and girls who have done good education take 2-year drop session and get a stipend of 20-25,000 rupees and work in a government school, right? So can a government also make this such a fellowship, like a wide, like such scheme should be there in every school, right? Almost like a compulsory military in Israel or a compulsory 1 year of social service in Canada. Can that happen, right? Or maybe I am not too big fan of anything compulsory, but anything which makes an incentive that if you do this, that'll give you extra credit point. Maybe you pay lesser tax in for next 3 years or something, some economic benefit that can happen, right? So yeah, but again, you're right. Currently, teacher come from a very, what do you say, a very fighting home background, not an aspirational job, not someone very suited for the job. Only thing for a lot of time, it's as a second job in the family, right? So all such arrangements, if we change your aspirational job, and then you will surely work towards your job, right? We all, whoever has worked in any job, gave our full 100% to the job as if it's our own company, right? So that's not happening in a school because currently that's not aspirational. If we can change that aspect of education, I'm sure every human being wants to do good in their life, and teachers will do the same if we just change this systemic problem and create aspiration around government school teaching.
Yep. Yeah. Manohar Garu, how would we would want to listen to your views on mother tongue, because we see what is happening in AP, that all schools are mandated to uh, make English the language of instruction. So, how do you look at it? Of course, see, from my experience, I can say yes. Reading literature has been enlightening. We get into the worldview of the author. We gain new experiences, but that's not how the world is running now. We have built up a system of hierarchy that is based on English language, on these soft skills and communication skills. So isn't it the case that if by opposing a language and instruction in mother tongue, in English, we are running the other way? Would love to know.
I said this before. I think we should take pride in our mother language, because we are brought up from the first day of our lives, in the company of our elders and our family members, and we all interact and share many thoughts, feelings, emotions very freely in our mother language than expressing it in the language that we learn. Even Narendra Modi ji recently, when he interacted with teachers, very clearly stressed what was incorporated in the national education policy about teaching children in mother language, mother tongue, for a minimum until 5th grade, if possible up to the 8th grade, because worldwide, I think Shantanu would be able to throw more light on it. But several countries have done this and continue to do it, and very successfully too. So it's not that we should just go back and criticize a government for making this decision, but I think it was done in a rush. It wasn't pre-planned in a right way. There was no pilot project tested to see what the feelings are and how they can actually build an infrastructure. As far as I knew, the last that I checked, more than 60% of the teachers were unprepared to suddenly move the syllabus from the Telugu language into the English language. And Jansena Party and Pawan Kalyan Garu, we've always been very strong in protecting our culture, our ethos, and our values and traditions that come with the language, because we really believe that the culture needs to be preserved. And that can happen when we respect our language and we all learn to read books, talk to each other in our language. And we don't want to be seen, or we definitely don't want to people to think that we are opposing something. Like I said, it's neither are we saying it's an imposition, nor are we for opposition. That's not true. What is right for the child? Please think from that perspective. Should government schools have English as a medium of instruction? Sure. Give the choice to the child. Let the child and the family decide what is most appropriate for them. Let the child make a decision. If he cannot, let the parents make the decision. It's not the government that should make the decision. How can you pass a blanket order overnight and say, come this academic year, all government schools will be teaching only in English? That, I think, was a very wrong call. And like I said, what about the libraries? What about the monumental research and efforts done by several of our people who have sacrificed for our great nation? So many people on the literary front, so many works of literature that are there in Telugu which should be understood. Like Shantanu said, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, what you read in English is different than what you read in your own language. It's far more inspiring when you read those books in our scriptures in our own language. So I think that effort, the manuscripts that have been preserved, this is one thing that I wanted to ask Shantanu is I remember the National Mission for Manuscripts. We used to have a fantastic mission to preserve the manuscripts, to digitize the manuscripts. That effort was something culture intact. And similarly, the libraries. What happened to the libraries? I had a village in my constituency where in the olden days, any marriage that happened in that village, a part of the dowry would be given to the village library. Oh. That's how people contributed. That's how they respected our language and our traditions and our culture. So I think merely by just jumping to a conclusion that this is the best way forward, this is the only way the impoverished people or the neglected sections of a society can gain access to knowledge, I think is far more emotional stress on the child than actually helping the child. So, like I said, we are not We are not imposing nor are we opposing. We merely mean to say this decision needs a little more time, needs a very practical approach, the government needs to have a clarity on how they intend to have this rolled out. Without a proper rollout plan, I think government was in a hurry. The courts have reacted in the right way, and the national education policy with Narendra Modi ji also has repeatedly stressed the need for us to have our mother tongue as a medium of instruction at least until the 5th or 8th grade. I think is very essential and will take us forward. Jansena Party believes that what we have requested, what we have aspired for, is there in the national education policy. And we thank the central government and Narendra Modi ji for that, because we truly believe that these are essential elements. The student should have the facility or the ability to learn more, and that is possible with the National Education Policy 2020.
Yeah. Before Shantanu takes up this question, I just have a small follow-up question on the same lines. So if we look at groundbreaking discoveries or inventions or literature in the last few years, none of them have come out in our mother tongue. I read Joshua myself, and it has been liberating for me to understand a Dalit's perspective. Same is the case with Sri Sri Mahaprasthanam Khadga Srishti. So it opened up a different world that I haven't seen. I agree that we have to be exposed to literature, that we have to use literature to be, we not use literature, we have to be in touch with literature. But can mother tongue become the medium of instruction, the prominent medium of instruction, given that none of the latest scientific discoveries or work is happening in our mother tongue? How would you take it up? Yeah.
So that's a contemporary viewpoint. Absolutely, I respect that. There's no doubt at all. But in the interest of, I'm saying this with a lot of responsibility about society in large. As a political party, we took the stand very strongly. Pawan Kalyan Garu and all of us, we discussed and debated, and we felt let's stand up for this particular action which the government has taken in terms of announcing that they want to have English as a medium of instruction. As you know, Pawan Kalyan Garu is very passionate about Telugu literature, and he's studied a lot, reads a lot of books from that perspective. And I'm so happy you mentioned about Joshua Garu, because from Guntur district. But I mean, like I said, there's so many inspiring works by several people, and that is something that we can't read, in English language. Some have been translated, some have not been. But I don't mean to say that purely insisting on Telugu as a medium of instruction is going to help the child, and we are being stubborn about it. We must have basic knowledge of the Telugu language. The child should be exposed to the language in such a way that he can read a book, communicate, understand what we are talking, and also be able to perhaps utilize this in future. I mean, you talked about IAS aspirants, and somebody had sent me a message long ago when we took up the Mananadi Mananodi Karikramam about Telugu Bhasha gurinchi enduku manam deen gurinchi poradalani danipaina. Quite a few people had sent messages, and the moderator for one particular session was an IAS officer, and he said, I went to government school, and all along I learned Telugu. So just because you learn Telugu doesn't mean that you won't qualify and get into the top ranks of the IAS exam. I did it. I was able to do it. So let it not be portrayed as a point that if you learn in Telugu you won't excel, you won't go further than X point. I think that's the sad part of this government's narrative. We feel that we respect the languages, and please give the choice to the parents and the child. And we must appreciate if people want to learn multiple languages. I think Hindi is a must. Your mother tongue is a must, and English also is a must. So these three languages will help us bond together across this great nation, and we all will be able to communicate much better and utilize the resources that we have. I hope that answers what you wanted, Swati.
Yes.
Okay.
Shantanu?
On the same question?
Yes.
So I think you're right. We have to see in the context of what research is saying on the mother tongue, that learning increases in the mother tongue if that's the medium of instruction. Why to make child struggle for two things, right? The language of instruction and the subject itself, right? And 99% of his life is in Telugu or in Hindi or in Gujarati in particular state. All of a sudden, you bring this subject called science or maths, where he's struggling with this, not struggling, he's trying to learn a subject also, and then the nuances of the language also, right? So I doubt that APJ Abul Kalam studied in English. I don't know, but I doubt, because the kind of era he's from, I doubt there was any English schools, right? And he was a scientist, right? Which I'm sure, because I heard him a couple of times directly. He speaks good English. So English as a language can be learned, right? Don't we have a foreign language institute in Osmania University where Indians speak very good Chinese and Spanish and French? So you can learn it as a language. It's a linked language. That's a different argument, that as a hegemony of language, how whoever has started English has created English as a mass linked language, and some of the languages, some of the countries are still maintaining their own edge, like Germany and Japan. Every technical book, Swati, which you will publish in a setting in America, you are forced to publish it in German and Japanese, because these are two engineering nations, right? And their engineers know Japanese and German only. So if you can force them to make it in Hindi and Telugu, that's like on the foreign policy level, right? Can you make the language so big? Which a lot of people. So language is also a cultural war, right? This is happening, and how English is being forced, and there is American English and a British English. That's fine. But again, even this tough war of English, Japan and Germany, two major engineering nations, every major book has to be published in Japanese and German also still today, right? Can't you create such a hegemony in our own language? But again, that will come when it will come, and the same logic should apply to Hindi also, right? And I'm very glad that Manohar Garu said Hindi so upfront, because that's a major contention between South and North. Oh, you are pushing Hindi on us. It's not somebody's pushing Hindi on us, because currently between first language, second language, and third language, 63% people in India speak Hindi. Is it not practical to make it a linked language or not? Just by this fact, how good the language, how bad the language, just let it be, right? A lot of people, especially in Tamil Nadu, just made it a pride issue. Only 5.5% people in India speak Tamil. Do you want everyone from 5.5 to become 60, or the people who are already 60%, let's everyone learn it and make it a linked language? See, Odia labor or Bihari labor goes to Tamil Nadu. What do you think they will speak? The Tamil Nadu guy doesn't know Odia, and the Odia guy doesn't know Tamil. They all speak in Hindi. I've seen them. In Kerala, they all speak in Hindi. All tutti-frutti Hindi, but they speak in Hindi. But that's the only linked language they have. They can't speak English. They don't know English. Maybe the owner knows English, but the Odia labor doesn't know English. They all speak in Hindi, right? It's anyway default linked language anyway. So I'm very happy that Manohar Garu is able to say it so upfront, because I've seen politicians towards South still a little edgy to speak in favor of Hindi, right? Because it is Tamil Nadu especially. But again, so yeah, I'm saying let's learn in our own languages and learn English or whichever language, English particularly, because English has given us edge for sure. In software industry, in BPOs, English has given us the edge. But again, that we learn English not only as a medium of instruction, as a language, which we can learn nicely, right? So I'm saying the local regional language, Hindi and English, is a very good formula going. So let's say in Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, Telugu, Hindi, English is an amazing formula.
I think the political positioning of Hindi has also become an issue. I mean, it's not just about these people protecting their language, but also how Hindi is positioned politically as a national language and the conflict of identity. So maybe that's something we need to work upon politically. It's something that we need to win hearts upon, not just impose.
No, but it's if I can add.
And also democracy, I think it fundamentally brings this challenge of majority. Just someone is small in number, some population is small in number. It doesn't mean that their voice cannot be heard so strongly as a majority number. I think that's one big question that comes up when Hindi is debated. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. Please.
Yeah, I'm saying I have found out the same way I told you, right? A lot of government school teachers send their children to private schools. Just if you can also check it. All Tamil Nadu politicians, all, I'm saying all, I'm not using a most, right? If they sit, the kind of schools their children go to, Hindi is a second language, a third language in all the schools. All good private schools in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai. In fact, the schools run by DMK, like their party members, right? They have Hindi in their school. Only thing for the government school children, they say, no, you will not learn Hindi because that will not go with my political agenda. See, a Tamil guy, when he comes to a Delhi metro project in Delhi, to a labor, he will talk to him in Hindi, right? It will give him extra. I'm just saying practically, if 61% people speak Hindi, why we are not learning French in our schools? Why we are not learning Spanish? Why English? Because it's practical. Because now most of the world speaks English. That's why. I'm not saying Hindi because I'm close to Hindi. I'm a North Indian. I'm saying because currently, as of today, if you can change the tile somehow overnight, you can change the 61% Hindi to Tamil. I'm fine. Tamil is a rich language. Telugu is a rich language. Currently, that's the status. That just use it. The way our argument tilts toward English as a practical language to international business, I think the same way is my argument towards Hindi as a way of doing business in India because 61% people speak it as first, second, and third language. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's discussion. We wanted to explore so many topics, but then we are short of time. We hope we have another session to dive deep into a few more areas and explore because I think it's such a vast document and has set a large goal at once that we cannot discuss it in entirety at once. And we need more such discussions to bring this policy into reality because somehow it still remains at the imaginary level, and bringing it down to from that abstractness to reality, it needs lots of steps, and like Manohar sir just pointed out, it's more through people's participation only. Okay, so thank you Shantanu, thank you Manohar sir for joining us today. It is very informative and insightful to have you both on the conversation. Thanks much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all your team and Shantanu ji. It was wonderful interacting with you. We'll definitely catch up soon. Wonderful. And you guys do the brilliant work that you're doing. Take it forward and be part of the system. All the best.
Thank you.
All the best. Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.